Hi, Govin here. Before we dive in, I want to let you know that you're listening to a special edition of Paper Napkin Wisdom, the Freedom Framework series built around a new book by Michael Walsh. In this series, Michael and I explore what it really takes to build a business that works for you, not the other way around. We're talking about freedom in your business, freedom from your business, and freedom because of your business. We'll talk about what each of those things mean. Each episode brings you tools, insights, and in-depth conversation between Michael and I about how to bring this kind of freedom into your life. If you're ready to design a business that you don't need to escape from, you're in the right place. Listen in.
Welcome to Paper Napkin Wisdom, where we share pearls of wisdom shared by some of the world's top entrepreneurs, leaders, and difference makers. Here's your host, Govin Jayaraman.
Hi, I'm Govin Jayaraman, and this is Paper Napkin Wisdom, episode 244. I'm so glad you've joined me for this very special edition. If you've ever wondered why some businesses hit invisible walls while others soar past them, or how to design a company that delivers both impact and freedom, then this episode is for you. Today, we're back with part 2 of the Freedom Framework Special Edition. It's a powerful series featuring the insights of business growth expert Michael Walsh. In the last episode, we explored the concept of designing a business that sets you free. In this one, we go deeper into the specific danger zones that every growing business between $1 million and $20 million in revenue will fall into. Michael brings remarkable ability to simplifying complex growth strategies into visual tools that you can act on today. And that's what he shares in this episode. It's a true game changer. You may not realize it now, but you're about to uncover exactly why your business feels stuck and what to do about it. And just imagine how things might just shift for you when you see those patterns clearly and know the next step. Let's dive in. This is part 2 of the Freedom Framework. This is Paper Napkin Wisdom. Let's listen in. Michael Walsh, welcome back to Paper Napkin Wisdom. I'm excited to have you with me today.
Well, thanks. It's great to be here.
So for people, I did touch on this in the intro, but I'm excited to say this with you as well, Michael. When we went off the air, before we went off the air, we had sort of teased this idea that you'd be coming back on a regular basis because you've got this great toolbox that's so valuable, and your ability to express these things is so articulate that you would come back on a regular basis to share with the Paper Napkin Wisdom community. And you've said generously that you're going to do that starting now. So thank you for that. And we're going to dive right in because your napkin shared a squiggly line. You shared a squiggly line with 5 sort of intersections along that squiggly line, and that squiggly line sort of steps its way from left to right upwards, like a graph. At the bottom, you talk about the 4 danger zones, and the 5 lines are 1 million, 2 million, 5 million, 10 million, and 20 million. Presumably revenue, and the danger zones are at underneath the 2, underneath the 5, underneath the 10, and in the 4. Why did you share that with me as our launching point to this series?
Well, okay, so just by way of background, back in March of 2020, when COVID joined us, I actually had a little extra time on my hands because I'd been doing a lot of international travel up until that point in time. And I no longer had to do a bunch of international travel. And I thought, well, you know what? It's probably not a bad time to write my next book. And one of the things that I had noticed was that once somebody is past $1 million in revenue, I mean, it's interesting because when you have little small companies, everybody wants to hit $1 million in revenue. That's the first goal, is everybody wants to hit $1 million. And in fact, I had a company that I was dealing with where this woman she was clear. She wanted to hit $1 million in revenue, and she kept talking that she wanted to hit $1 million in revenue. And when we checked in, she was actually already at 1.4, but she still wanted to hit $1 million in revenue. I mean, $1 million in revenue is the big deal, right? So it's like, and then when she discovered it, she's like, oh, not quite sure where I want to go now. We had to actually recreate what a future might look like together, and we had kind of fun with that. But $1 million is there, but it's almost like, you need $1 million in revenue. It's like those are almost the table stakes, because it's, to survive. To get $1 million in revenue is a good chunk of survival in terms of growing a business. But then there's this whole journey that people enter into on the shoulders of that. And but what I found was that at each of the major milestones of growth beyond that first million, obviously the first one's at 2 million. Then if somebody gets to 2 million, then they've got another milestone at 5 million. And if they get to 5 million, they've got another milestone at 10 million. And if they got a $10 million company, then their next milestone naturally is at 20 million. So I thought, okay, fine. But what I found is that either at somewhere around each of those milestones, there lurks these underlying danger zones. And here's what I find. If entrepreneurs are pretty savvy people, okay, but I find business owners really are pretty smart. A lot of people smart, but business owners, I find that, if you can see a problem, you can figure out how to deal with it. If you can't see the problem, but you know that it's there, again, you can figure it out and you can deal with it. I don't have to necessarily see it. If I know it's there, then I know to anticipate it and deal with it. It's the problems that I can't see and I have no idea they're even there. Those are the ones that as an entrepreneur or business owner, I'd be stuck with. And that's where what I found is that people struggle. And so what I found is that each of these milestones, so for example, as somebody's approaching 2 million, between 1.7 and 2 million, they start to get stuck. And they just don't know why. And they can't tell why, as far as that's concerned. And then once they get past that one, they figure that out, for those who do, then just after 5 million, anywhere from about 5.25 to, I've seen it as late as 7, but usually 5.25, 5.5 million, they're stuck again. Completely different set of issues. And then as somebody approaches 10, got a third set of issues that go. And then there's this chasm between 12 million and 20 million, which is like no man's land. It's you're too big and too small. And so there's underlying stuff all through that. So those are the 4 areas that I've actually labeled the danger zones. And part of what I did was it started me on a journey. It's like, what are the dynamics that are going on there? How does it that people get stuck? How come we can't see it? And then what is it? What's at play? And then how do we deal with it? So that's what danger zones are about.
That's really cool. And one of the things that I think was really interesting in the way you talked about the danger zones is you didn't seem to differentiate between service and product industries in talking about those danger zones. Is there a difference?
Actually, there is. What I find is that at some level it plays with all companies, but what I found was I spend 90% of my time with service-based businesses or businesses with a strong service component, specifically where there's the expertise of the people involved. So whether it's professional services like architects, engineers, medical practitioners, people in healthcare, or whether it's skilled trades, okay, where there's a combination of services and the product. But again, you've got the expertise of the people involved, or training and development companies, things like that. Again, services where there's expertise of the owners is where, let's put it this way, this is at its cleanest at those things. Now, when it's a combination of a product or service, the numbers shift a little bit. Because if there's a pass through of product, then it just inflates the number. The danger zones are there. It's just that they're less predictable associated with those revenue numbers.
Would it be more of a net revenue thing for those groups, or is it just totally a different model?
It varies by industry. Mm-hmm. Like if I'm selling kitchen cabinets, okay, somebody's physically producing them and doing them, your numbers could be incredibly different than if I'm in stone and tile.
Yeah.
Because it depends on how big a factor the thing is, and the net revenue, it's not as clean. Like I haven't found a clean ratio for that because it does vary industry by industry.
Got it. Okay. So these are what I wanted to get across is these are guideposts, and they will vary slightly whether you're a product or service company, but this is predominantly, we're talking about mostly the expertise of a service or a strong service component. These are the marks. So let's talk about let's talk about this first danger zone at $2 million, or coming up on it, right? So you said around 1.7 people start to get stuck.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that each of these danger zones, you're very right. You don't know what's going on. There's just some resistance. It's like this force that's holding you back, but it's not a force. It's structure, right? It's a system.
Well, there are structures that are underneath, but the thing that I found interesting, and this is what I found in common with all of them, in each of these zones, somebody's outstripping a structure somewhere, except it's the consequence of the structures that are being outstripped, and what happens when people try to replicate those structures or to make them more robust, that people get in trouble.
So what does that mean?
Well, I'll give you an example. So if you take a look at what the biggest issues are, for example, in Danger Zone 1 is you're approaching 2 million. Okay. Yeah. Again, thinking of a service-based company. Okay. You're spread too thin. Okay. There's too many junior staff there to support, and there's not enough senior support. And the problems just keep seeming to multiply. You're under $2 million. It's not like you got a bunch of extra money to have a bunch of layers of management as far as that's concerned. Okay. So you don't have the management support in the business as far as that's concerned. And any senior company are usually specialists. Senior people are usually specialists. So they're not there as managers. They're there because they're more accomplished and they're actually carrying more of the client load. Everything when you're moving between $1 million to $2 million, it's still about client delivery. Whether I'm an interior design firm, whether I'm an architecture firm, whether I'm an engineering firm, or whether I'm a medical practitioner, I'm looking at how do we deliver. I don't need a bunch of managers if I've got a physiotherapy company. I got physiotherapists who are actually taking care of my patients as far as that's concerned, and what I find is that at that size, either cash flow's tight or people are worried that cash flow will be. In other words, there's been enough ups and downs getting to that point that even it may be tight, it may not be tight, but I don't trust the cash flow is going to continue to be there if I'm not, super vigilant. So I'm really nervous to spend the extra money on talent when I'm not even sure what that talent should look like when I'm talking about somebody with management skills and capabilities.
And it's totally a different kind of talent than has been useful to your business to this point, right? Because you want really skilled staff who are delivering more to your clients versus now you need to add a layer that wasn't there before, right? A layer that's helping you manage this junior staff or other layers, right? You need to change the way the business is structured.
Well, and usually the place that people go when that happens is they take the most senior person that they've got and they say, you know what, I trust this person. So I've got Maxine. She's taking really good care of the client. She knows exactly how our product works. You know what? She's probably the best person to manage these other people and support these other junior people coming in. Of course, the skills that it takes to accomplish something are very different than the skills that it takes to actually support other people, as far as that's concerned. So what happens is it's a technical specialty that gets people into that role. So what you have is a near miss as opposed to a fit. I mean, we're all taught how to generate a result. And then you figure, well, if you're in management, your job is to generate a bigger result. Well, no. If my job when I was, in the workforce delivering a direct result was my accountability to deliver that result. If somebody's managing me, then it's still my job to deliver that result. It's not like I give up my accountability and they're all of a sudden there, although they feel like they're accountable because the boss expects them to be. And as a result, what happens is the result is what gets managed. And the people are now starting to be treated a little bit like cogs in a system. And it's just not good.
No. And isn't that also like the root of all reverse delegation too? When people are when you take someone who's really good at delivering the result and graduate them or promote them to a manager role, they jump in and take over the result all the time because that's what they're really freaking good at, right?
Well, that's what they know how to do.
Right.
I got promoted to management because I know how to get stuff done. Now I'm being accountable for getting more stuff done. So, well, people, I obviously know how to do it. They don't know how to do it. I'll just tell them. And if they don't get it when I tell them, I'll show them and I'll work with them and just do it with them until they figure it out. It doesn't quite work that way.
No. So so what? So that's danger zone number one.
Yeah.
And what do they have to do? What does someone have to do to get through that danger zone?
Well, let's put it this way. The underlying issue is when you see the question I look at it. So that's the presenting symptom. What's the underlying issue? The
Mm.
underlying issue is whatever the solution is that people chart to figure out or try to figure out. What they miss is actually what is both the culprit and the solution to all of these danger zones.
Oh, okay.
Okay. The culprit is people, and the solution is people.
So
So go ahead.
let's talk about an example of that.
If you tell me what to do, I feel told. So
Yep.
one of two things happens. Either let's say assume that I just trust you and that's fine. So you tell me what to do, I just follow what to do. What I do in accepting what you tell me is I park my thinking at the door and I just do what you tell me. Because that's if somebody's told what to do, they'll go, oh, okay, and they'll just do that. Well, their brain's in the implementation of that. Their brain's not in thinking through and sorting things out.
Mm-hmm.
Except we're in a service-based environment where the solutions are not obvious. There's not one size fits all. Sometimes there's nuances to the things, and nobody can possibly know all the nuances when they're actually instructing or supporting somebody else. Even if they've had experience based on their background, there's always nuances that the employee is going through that may or may not fit exactly, and they may not even be articulate enough to actually identify those details. So what happens is, I mean, if I'm doing a product, as long as there's consistency in the inputs and consistency in the outcomes, no matter how complicated the algorithm, I can break it down. Because if I'm doing toasters, all the toasters have to come out the same. Or if I'm doing cars, all the cars of that model have to come out the same. Or if I'm processing steel, all the steel is processed and cut the same way. Whereas if I'm dealing with service-based issues where I've got volatile emotions because somebody else has got schedule compression at the level of the customer, and I've got to deal with that person differently than what my boss was dealing with in another very different situation, I don't necessarily get spoon-fed the direction, yet in being told something, I just literally will follow the instruction. And now that's a little bit simplistic version of it, but nuances of that are exactly what happened as far as that side of it's concerned. So the other side of it is you see, what a boss will do is they'll actually say, this person who was really organized, they really took care of all the details, and as a result, they're the best ones to guide these people. Yet they're not necessarily the best ones. Quite often I go in and I see that, Candace was the person that the boss, there was a situation where there was a woman by the name of Candace who was actually, she was tasked with actually managing the people. And this was over in Europe. And everybody thought she was a little harsh. And the boss really loved this woman because the boss decided that, she could really get things done, and her attention to detail and her rigor got things across the line. But other people just started getting a little bit put off. And what we found was there was another person, okay, Miriam, who was another project manager, but she listened for where the employee was at. And she sort of went there. And so what we found is, while the boss really loved Candace, I made a suggestion. I said, what about Miriam? And she's like, Miriam? Well, I said, yeah, look at how many people, they just bond in with her. They love working with her. Yeah, but she's cranking out a whole bunch of stuff. I need her to do that. Yeah, I know. But at the same time, look at how productive her people are. And she's like, I never thought of it that way. You're right. And so what Candace did was Candace became a support in different aspects of the company, but at the same time, Miriam actually started supporting the juniors more formally. And what happened was that a lot of the issues they were having actually just started to dissipate because they had the right person in the role, and it's just that nobody had ever thought of what makes a good manager at that size.
Yeah, and isn't that part of the problem? We sort of pick up these antiquated ideas of what makes a good manager
Mm-hmm.
based on history as opposed to really understanding what's happening around us right now? Isn't that part of the issue?
Well, part of the issue I find is that literally, if as an individual I'm expected to generate a result, as a manager, there's this notion that then the manager is accountable for a larger result. When that's actually just not true. The manager's job is to support the people who generate the result. So instead of being accountable for their own result, their job is to support others who are each accountable for their own result, and then just to make sure that they're coordinated. Now, where it gets kind of hairy is that manager is usually also an individual producer at the time, because quite often you don't have enough money at the table so that they can just manage others. They're also carrying their own load. And what happens is that's where they get their satisfaction from is their personal deliverables. So then they'll diminish the support piece going, well, just do it this way. And because, they're spending their time generating their result. But if this same person is supporting 5 different people, there's going to be a higher actual production value by making sure that the 5 people have what they need so they can excel than there is just on this person handling their own production capabilities as far as that side of it's concerned. So I mean, there's a lot of pieces here.
Yeah. But very simply, it's about understanding that, you said the culprit and the solution are both the people, right?
Yeah.
And when you get to this 2 million point, people are spread too thin, they have too much junior staff, but they're conflicted about delivery versus management and leadership. And the thing that suffers is management and leadership, because it's easier just to deliver. It's easier to go back to what they were strong at to get to that point, right?
Well, and who I choose is somebody who's been good at delivery, not necessarily somebody who's been good at supporting others in delivery. And so again, too often what will happen is the boss will pick somebody who's a near miss, or they may not even have somebody yet who can actually step into that role. And the boss doesn't want to step into that role because, again, quite often I've seen bosses who actually started their company based on their personal ability to deliver, not necessarily their ability to manage others. And, the other thing I found is that different people have got skills with different types of people. So, for example, you could have one boss who's really good with juniors and is really good at nurturing juniors. You could have another boss who's actually really good with senior people and they're horrible with juniors because they're just impatient. So the question is, what kind of person should manage and support the different types of people that are sitting on your team? And a lot of times people don't line up the boss with the people who need the support and make sure that that they dovetail together. More often they clash as opposed to dovetail. And so that's another dynamic that's at play. So there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. So those are some of the moving parts at the 2 million part. What changes fundamentally as we approach 5 million?
Well, here's what happened. It's interesting because once you can figure that out, and it doesn't take long, people do tend to figure that out. And once they've got somebody that they know starts to hit a groove, then what happens is everything starts to work again. And they go from 2 to 5 very quickly, I find, relatively speaking. And then just on the other side of 5, what happens is that you see things like profits start to dip at that level for the company overall. The cost overages on projects become a larger issue than they were before. Quality issues could start to emerge, small cracks in what has been stellar service, and the growth starts to stall out a little bit. Or it becomes certainly more challenging to continue, and your net income is a constant battle to address. So it's like you've grown to a certain level. And a lot of times it's just that you've got too many teams going on. And so the structures that allowed you to run 2 or 3 teams and generate the numbers, now that I've got 6 or 7 teams, there's these issues are starting to show up. And the company's not structured well enough to catch the issues. Now, here's what people tend to do when this happens, is they start bringing in structures. Well, we need project-based accounting. And we need to see, what's the productivity of each thing. And what happens is then people start to put people under their thumb. Your numbers are slipping. as opposed to saying, wow, this person's numbers are slipping or this team's numbers are slipping. We haven't trained them right. I mean, little things like that. It's amazing because it's like, well, it's like this need to make it work, as opposed to sitting back and going, okay, it's not working as well as it has been. What's missing? Well, first thing is, at 2 million, you don't need to do a lot of tracking to see how well you're doing. But by the time you get 2 and past 5 million, all of a sudden, the game's a lot more hairy than it used to be because you've got more teams at play. And so as a result, what happens is that you've got insufficient reporting to see how you're doing. And then when people start to bring in reporting, people naturally hesitate because they feel like they're being measured and they're being judged, as opposed to using the information to support people in terms of their growth and development.
Yeah, isn't it also like you talked about the speed of growth? Like the speed of growth between 2 and 5 is relatively quick, and I've experienced that too. And I find that it's like a success blanket a little bit, right? That people just say, "Oh, we're growing, like we're successful," but that growth covers up a lot of these sort of profitability stalls and product overage costs. People say, "Oh, we'll make it up on the," like mentally, they're not tracking things, or to your point, it's not as easy to track things by looking at them. You have to analyze them. You have to have better data. You have to have a better dashboard, right?
Correct. So let's say you and I are 2 team leaders. You've got your team, I got my team. You know what? We both have grown up in this system. We know how to keep an eye. And if we see something wrong, we know how to clip it so that we can actually fix it. Except we're now 2 of 5 people. And so there's 3 more that don't necessarily have the same eyesight as we do, even though they've been grown up through the ranks. But because they've been grown up through the ranks a little bit quicker than we were, we took our time and we actually learned these things. There's things that they don't know to look for, or things that they don't realize that are happening. Or you might have another junior and they're not sure what to do with the junior, so they just give them a particular job, and the person is starting to get bored at their existing job. And so what happens is that their attention may wane, or it may be in a situation, not just somebody bored, it just may be somebody that really wants to make things go, and they're very anxious and they want to do a good job, so they might overdo it on some things, but they're burning hours to get the same result, except the result's not quite right because nobody really taught them how to do it right. I mean, all these little things people overlook if you haven't got decent reporting that supports them. But reporting that supports people is very different than reporting that actually is the boss of everything.
What do you mean by the difference? Because I think there's a really big, you're using your words carefully. There's a significant chasm between supporting people with reporting versus bossing people over reporting, like forcing an outcome, right?
Totally.
What does it feel like? What's the difference?
Well, one of the things that we've identified is that everybody considers the core of the business to be your ability to generate a result. Mm-hmm. And the results, one that generates value for customers and gives you your profit. So and then the people actually are the ones that do that. So if I'm the manager, my attention is going to be on our ability to generate the result. And the people that do it are the people that plug in. So I may have teams that plug into that. But I don't consider the teams as the core. The core is the ability to generate the result. The people are the ones that do it. Okay? And if the people are the ones that do it, my focus is on, is the result getting generated? One of the things that I've found is that you actually have to rethink that core. And if I rethink that core and consider the people as part of the core, so if a team of knowledge workers is part of that core, it's not just the ability to generate the result, it's the people working together in a team to generate that result. Now, that sounds like, yeah, of course, but it's not. You see, because my value proposition used to be there's my profit and customer value. But if I put the team as part of that core, then there's my profit, customer value, and professional growth of the people. So all 3 have to be fed. And so the key is that I've got to set it up so that the people are just as important as that ability to generate the result, because the people are in fact the ones to do it. So do I focus on the result and I get the people to do it, or do I focus on the people and support them and teach them how to generate the result? If the people are part of the core, I'll support them on how to do it. If the core is the actual ability, then if they don't do it, somebody else will. How many times have I heard, your systems are here to stay. People come and people go, but your systems are here to stay. Your systems are what count. The people aren't what count. And I'm like, are you kidding me with that crap? Who do you think delivers? You know what? People come because they actually want to contribute something, but they also come with an expectations that not only are they going to get paid, they're actually there to grow professionally. And so,
Right.
so if that's not just as important as the ability to generate a result, you're going to end up with people becoming cogs to a system.
And what's really important is you keep on talking about the core. The core has to be growing the people at this stage, because if you don't, then you're stuck. Somebody once said, what if I train these people and they go? Well, what if you don't train these people and they stay?
Right.
And then they're untrained people who stay. Like, you don't want that.
And those are the ones who do stay, by the way, the ones that can't find a job somewhere else.
Exactly. So,
but the other side of that is it's like, when you start saying, well, the core is to grow the people, it's like, it's not to grow the people at the expense of generating the result. It's got to be a both and.
yeah.
So what you find is that if you rethink the core of the business, instead of your ability to generate a result, it's your people and their ability to generate the result. You're in a situation where the people become part of the core. So it's a both and. We absolutely need the result. What is it that we grow in terms of our people? Their ability to generate the result. That very specifically is what they came to work on. That's what we promised them when we hired them. And so it's not just, it's like they get it's interesting because I was dealing with this young man who's a new partner to the firm that I was working with, and he said, "Can I just tell them what to do? Can I just get them to do that stuff? They're even willing." I said, "Yeah, but what you lose is their thinking. Are you sure? Can we do it in a way that they would just tell them to think too?" He says, "It'll be so much easier." He says, "I totally understand, but it'd be just so much easier if I just tell them what to do." It's like, okay, try it and see what it goes. He says, "It's not working very well." Because you tell them what to do, either they resist and push back because they got their own ideas, or they're in a situation where they blindly follow what I tell them, and then they don't tell me about some of these nuances that they overlook.
And they certainly don't tell you about the things that don't work.
Correct. Well, they can't. They're so busy trying to, give you what you need. So it's not like everybody paints this picture that if you tell people what to do, then you're bad or something. And it's like, but I tell people what to do and they do it and then it works. And it's like, okay, but it doesn't work all the time. And as you get bigger, there's more and more cracks that show up because these uncovered areas that you haven't had the chance to work through and explain with people still show up. So people need to learn how to think through those issues. And as long as they're relying on the boss for instruction, it's like you have my brawn at the table, but you don't have my brain. You basically have to be the brain and I'm the brawn. Well, that creates an us-them. If we're working together, there's just us, there's no them. And we need it to just be us because that actually stops things from getting kind of squirrely.
Yeah. So what happens in zone 3, $10 million?
And well, as you approach $10 million, okay, here's what you find is that, okay, so you can get through these because if you can get reporting that supports people and that you really can start to see where are people struggling to achieve the types of results that they want and how do I support them in gaining the training and the support to do that's fine. But then somewhere around, between 8 and 10 million, what happens is, again, you get more inconsistency with project team performance in terms of the quality of the deliverables, project profitability, or both. It's basically a larger version of the earlier issue because there's a higher number of teams at work. There's also very little ongoing training that's formally in place to increase or improve the skills of your people. They figure, well, they're professionally trained. That should be enough. Okay. You figure that, on the job, they get the learning that they need. That's fine. But the truth is it's usually not enough, and the industry training is insufficient as well. In some fields, industry training is mandatory, but it's generally not enough to deal with the levels of sophistication that are needed. And it's not only the staff, but also managers are left on their own to figure things out. Okay. So yeah, begin, they're into the management role. They should figure this out. People generally don't train managers as well as they need to be trained. You don't feel the need to provide the people with more. The people are good and they don't seem to need anything more, despite the fact that there's some issues that are cropping up. And so the other thing that happens is teams start to get siloed. Okay. And what you'll find is some managers get protective and they find a way to keep their people from being, I've got an extra half a body or an extra full person, but I got to hang on to them because I know in 2 weeks I'm going to need them again. And if I let go of them, somebody else is going to take them and I'm just going to be short staffed. And so what happens is that teams starting to get siloed again, as you get between 8 and 10 million, these are the types of things that happen. Again, it's a similar version, but at a larger scale. And the numbers, sorting out the numbers don't actually sort this thing out. In other words, giving people reporting doesn't solve this.
And one of the things you said was they should be able to figure this out. We're talking about managers and talking about senior staff and project leads. But I think the other thing that happens is, and it's a psyche thing, as I'm thinking back to it, is, well, I'm paying so much for these people. They should be able to figure it out. This is why I'm paying them.
Yeah.
But that's not the whole story. We still got to support them and train them.
Well, if just paying somebody more doesn't handle the training need.
Right.
And somebody could have a lot of training and experience in one environment, and so they come in commanding an additional dollar, which is fair. They still haven't got it sorted out based on your situation yet, per se, or they might have at the level of 1 or 2 teams. But when you've got a number of different teams participating, the other thing that I find happens is that this is where people fall into the trap of how to measure their people. Okay. What happens is that up until 5 or 6 or 7 million, everything's been working on teams, especially if there's project work involved. And there's a lot of industries where there's a lot of project work involved. And so what happens is but people are coming and going between and among different projects. Okay. Architects have longer projects. Engineers have shorter projects, for example, just to pick on two industries. Where an architect might have a $2 million fee. Somebody could be on this project for 6 months. Equivalent, comparable engineering firm on that thing might have 4 or 5 of those in the same 6-month time frame because they have a much smaller part of that particular building. So what you find is that teams are constantly forming and reforming and forming and reforming, as far as that's concerned, and they're constantly looking at how do we actually get the right resources for the teams as far as that's concerned. And then what happens is that there's not a way to measure the individual success of the people, yet they still want raises, they still want promotions. So people switch from results-based to a competency-based model. And they start saying, well, if you're at this level, you should get this level of competencies or these levels of capabilities. And they start training people on capabilities and they start paying them based on the capabilities, not the direct results. And so they'll change it by department, or they'll change it all the people that are at level 4 of this have to have all these criteria. And so what happens is you start eroding the things that actually have employees be unique. Because everybody's got to be the same if they're in a similar class.
System structure, yeah.
And the minute I start, if they're interchangeable, I've lost the X factor of actually having people be bringing their unique skills that actually can make a difference to my profitability and my client's result.
Incredible. I love
their satisfaction.
Yeah, and keep them there. So what happens in Danger Zone 4?
Danger Zone 4.
Now, one of the things I really love the way you talked about it off the top was you said, too big to be little, but too little to be big. That's a big problem in that size because you're sort of in the middle of a lot of opportunity, but you're too big for the stuff that worked at half the size.
Correct. I've seen people that get to $10 million and they're 23% net income. And then they go to 12 million, and then they go from 12 to 13, and all of a sudden they're at 8% net income, and they're wondering what the heck happened.
Or worse. Like in our case, it got worse than that. Like we went to the negatives badly.
We can go a lot lower. Exactly. Basically what happens is, at 10 million, I need one set of accounting software. At 20 million, I need a whole different set. there's not an interim set. And if you try to have an interim set, then now you're spending a whole bunch of money to do that. Usually got an inadequate HR department at 10 million for a 15 or $20 million company. In other words, all the infrastructure support that you're going to need at 20 million, you've got to put in place at some point. And the truth is there's not enough money at 10 million to fund all these additional expenses, yet there's not the revenue coming in to cover that yet. Yet you still need them as you go. Because I promise you, when somebody's at 5 million, you probably are going to see 3 accounting systems before you hit 20.
Yeah.
There's the one you got at 5. There's the one you need somewhere between 5 and 10 or 12. And then there's the one that you need to start heading towards 20. And talk about a disruption. Okay. Your accounting, and I'm not just talking about the financial accounting. I'm talking about management accounting as well. And how do I deal with my key performance indicators, and how do I actually, find out the productivities of the different teams, and how do I support which clients are where. And, there's so many different noodles that are going on as far as that side of it is concerned, that there's something we call the run for the roses. Once they're at 12 or 13 million, you want to get them to 20 within a couple of years, because it's going to be painful in the meantime. But in the meantime, the other thing you do is you actually start putting the infrastructure pieces in for 18 or 20. And you just realize that that's going to be a net investment. And if I can get myself through that period quicker, then I'm in a situation where I can actually live with the investment. And I know within a couple of years, I'm going to get the return right back. Because what I find is you grow and then you invest, which may drop your net, but within a couple of years, that's come right back. So if I put it in year 1, by year 2, it's come back. And I put it in year 3, and by year 4, it's come back. Except between 12 and 20, you pretty much have to get yourself to 18 or 20 before it comes back, as far as that's concerned. But it's also rethinking how you're supporting your people. That's the other half of that thing. The other thing is that quite often when you're dealing between 12 and 20 million, I've seen a lot of professional services firms where they have a number of partners, and nobody trusts the managing partner. Everybody has to have their voice on it. There's a whole bunch of competing self-interests that go along, and that just makes the whole thing harder. How many times have I seen it where you promote 3 people and 5 leave?
Yeah.
Every time there's a promotion, there's going to be people leave because they got their nose out of joint because they weren't promoted. And and it's like, well, there's actually ways to not have to go through that. But it takes so much conversation with people before you ever get to the promotion stage. And nobody realizes that before they've lost their first dose of people.
And that's that HR infrastructure to some degree, but it also speaks to the leadership and transparency structure. Like a lot of the stuff that changes between 10 and 20 is felt but not seen, right? It's
Correct.
But it's underneath everything. It's not overt. It's not stuff that people necessarily will notice, but it's people will feel because it's beneath the layer.
If I have treated our ability to generate the result as the core, if I treat our people as part of that same core, the individual teams of knowledge workers as part of that core, then all the way along, first of all, I would look at a different model for how we actually grow the company, as opposed to doing it departmentally and things like that. The second thing is that you really want to make sure that people are supported and that they feel like their career and their growth is just as important as the company's end result. Now, it can't be more important than the company's end result, but the company's end result can't be more important than that. And most people don't know how to navigate their way through that.
Well, that's a huge point that you are making. Like neither end of that equation can be more important than the other. It's a this and. It is truly an equal sign.
Mm-hmm. And anybody hearing this is going to go, how the heck do you do that?
Well,
this is
why this is not a one episode podcast. So we're going to come back and we're going to pick up on this theme. Michael, I want to leave it there because I think this is a great place to start and set the stage about what we're going to be talking about coming up.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
That was Michael Walsh, and wow, what an incredible way to continue the Freedom Framework special series here on Paper Napkin Wisdom. Michael laid it out so clearly. Every business hits danger zones, but few are prepared to lead through them. From the messy grind of $1 million in revenue to the chaos curve at $2 million the leadership bottleneck at 5 million, and the identity crisis near 10 million, these aren't just revenue milestones, they're wake-up calls. Anticipate the breaking points. They're predictable. The more you expect them, the better you'll navigate them. Build systems before you scale. People don't solve broken processes. Systems do. Invest in your leaders. You can't do it all, but you can lead people who can. Redefine your identity as you grow. Reinvention is part of the journey, not a sign of failure. Design your freedom and don't wait for it. You're not building a business, you're building the life you want. Michael, thank you for showing us that clarity doesn't come from working harder. It comes from asking better questions and having the courage to design the business you actually want to lead. If you found value in today's episode, don't keep it to yourself. Subscribe to Paper Napkin Wisdom on your favorite platform, leave us a review, and most importantly, share this episode with someone who's navigating one of these growth stages right now. And here's your challenge. Draw your own version of Michael's 4 danger zones. Where are you? Where do you need to shift? Then post it with the hashtag at Paper Napkin Wisdom. Pick up the Freedom Framework, Michael's new books, and he'll be able to guide you through it too. Until next time, remember, wisdom isn't what you know, it's what you apply. And even the smallest idea scribbled on a napkin can unlock your biggest breakthrough. Make it a great day.